Welcome explorers. Today, dive into the thrilling TTP narration of Hunting with Predators by Banancake, a 25-part fan-made saga from the Nature of Predators series by Spacepaladin15 on r/HFY.
Memory transcription subject, Vikri, Venlil volunteer crewman of UNS Cardinal. Date, standardized human time, October 26, 2136, 9 days after the Battle of Earth. I shivered as a cold wind pierced through my fur. The fire flickered as the flames whipped about over the charred logs beneath. I would periodically poke at the ashes with a stick and watch the embers rise into the night. The humans were huddled close together in thick jackets as dense clouds of steam rose from their faces. They held their huge hands just inches from the fire, soaking up all the warmth they could. It took them ages to get it going with how much snow was on the ground. Fortunately, the storm cleared up shortly after we crash-landed, but with as cold as it was, nothing was melting anytime soon. Querek and I were sitting just on the other side of the fire, in much the same shape as the humans. We had a thick blanket draped over us. We suggested that the humans keep it as they had no fur to insulate themselves, but they were quite insistent. Tenga, a tall human male with a slightly darker complexion than the other two, cleared his throat. "One more time, Reese," he muttered quietly, his voice clearly sore from the cold air. Reese, a smaller human male with a long black beard, looked over at Tenga with a tired expression. Tenga answered the look with a slow nod as he angled his eyes downward. Somewhat snappily, Reese pulled a radio from his jacket and turned it on. A quiet static noise emanated from the device, breaking the monotony of the crackling fire and howling wind, before Reese pressed a button to transmit. "This is Corporal Reese of the United Earth Defense Corps, broadcasting on open channels. Can anyone read me?" He spoke clearly, concisely, emphasizing every word with urgency. There was a hint of an accent in his nasally tone that, I've heard, comes from a place called Texas. The static returned as we awaited a response. Something. Anything. Any variation in the noise that we'd all come to loathe hearing. Nothing. Just noise from the stars mocking us. Reese repeated the message once more. Another brief period of waiting. Nothing. "That's enough," Tenga said solemnly. Reese placed the radio back in his jacket and bundled up once again. "What a victory lap this has been." The third human piped up. Grant, another male, somewhere in between Tenga and Reese in size. A marksman, and the proud owner of the sole functioning gun remaining in this ragtag fighting force. Reese scoffed. "A win's a win, we're winning all right. Feastin' on the world's finest, maybe poisonous, maybe not wild berries with the boys who saved Earth." He flicked a purplish berry into his mouth. "Querek and I could survive on fruits like that for a while, but the humans had much higher energy requirements than we did. They wouldn't be able to survive on this forever, and I think Querek knew that too. Just by looking at them we could see the hunger. They were thinning. Every now and then I would hear the horrible gurgling of their empty stomachs. I've even noticed them drooling a few times. They were producing too much saliva. What would happen when the humans were on the verge of starvation? Just how tasty would we start to look? I didn't believe for a second they would want to eat us, but what if they just couldn't control it? We knew when we got cut off during the bombardment that it could very well come to this, but part of me had hoped we'd be rescued by then. Then, as if thinking the exact same thing, Querek interrupted the silence with a quiet, shivering voice. "If you need to hunt, we won't try to stop you." The three men didn't take their eyes off the fire. Neither did we. They began doing that telltale fidgeting that humans do when they're nervous or stressed. The silence persisted for a long moment as we all seemed to avoid eye contact with each other. Finally, to my relief, Lieutenant Tenga looked up at me through the orange haze. "Vic?" He'd assigned me that nickname ever since our escape pod landed, and as far as the others were concerned, that was my real name. Tenga and I served on the same ship, though I only ever saw him in passing. We were forced to abandon ship after it ate a missile barrage and started burning from bow to stern. Each escape pod could fit up to 10 people, and every crewman was assigned a specific pod in case of emergency. Tenga and I were the only ones that made it to ours. I met his gaze. He always spoke with such authority and evenness. There was a compassion in those hazel, predatory eyes that I could never explain. Like he could see my very thoughts. It was both comforting and frightening. I sighed and closed my eyes, a cloud escaping my mouth. I didn't like the thought of it. Not one bit. A human eating artificially made flesh was a revolting enough sight, but to think of them eating an innocent animal made my skin crawl. I'd come to respect and cherish these humans deeply in the week or so we'd survived together. If I saw them eating once living meat, would it change my perspective on them? Would they be more like the Arxer in my eyes? That thought had assaulted the corners of my mind with impunity since about the third day. I certainly wasn't going to let them starve themselves for my sake, but I was scared. Scared of what I might think of them. I looked to Querek, my fellow Venlil, who was studying my expression as I sat thinking. He was one of the bravest Venlil I'd ever met. He strapped into the co-pilot's seat of a human fighter craft when the fighting broke out in orbit. He stuck with his human pilot through some of the most intense fighting the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought like animals, and Querek did too. Only when his pilot stopped responding did he eject after his craft went hurtling through Earth's thick atmosphere like a meteor. He'd survived for days on a decimated alien planet before he found us. He met my gaze and flicked his tail supportively. I looked back down at the fire. I won't stop you either, I said, releasing a breath that felt like it weighed 20 pounds. The humans looked at each other and nodded. Any of you boys know how to hunt? Reese asked. What kind of question is that? Isn't it innate? Maybe it isn't. Maybe the desire to kill is innate and the hunting part is taught. That isn't fair. The thought pierced my mind. An ever-raging internal dialogue. It wasn't. What choice did they have when they couldn't digest half of the plants around and the other half might kill them? That thought came across more judgmental than I'd anticipated. I've hunted hogs before. Tenga answered. I shuddered. Tenga? What reason does he have to hunt? I got my answer almost immediately. They were destroying entire farms and costing farmers damn near their entire livelihood, so the local government put out a bounty on them. He clarified, glancing over to me as if my thoughts had just played on loudspeakers. Yeah. Nasty fuckers. Dealt with them a few times down south. Reese added. I'd expected them to have never been on a hunt. I thought that part of their culture was a thing of the past. Their reasons were sound enough, but... We should probably rest up, Lieutenant. Grant interjected. And, mind the more docile hearing ears, yeah? He gestured to us. I didn't realize it, but we'd been gawking at them the entire time. Awkwardly, I looked down to the ground and sealed my jaw shut. The humans did the same. There was silence for a few seconds before Tenga spoke up. To bed then, gentlemen. The lot of us stirred to get under our bedrolls close to the fire. As things settled down and the night drew on, sleep eluded me, and I couldn't elude the thoughts bouncing around in my skull. Deep down, were the humans the same as the Arxer? That's ridiculous. You'd be food right now if they were. But beyond their empathy, beyond that thick veil of control and logic, is there a part of them that still craves blood? See for yourself. I shuddered at that thought. Would going with them on a hunt finally bring me clarity? Had I fooled myself into believing that I'd accepted them for who they were? Or was I simply ignoring that one part of them that I only could associate with the Arxer? My ears folded down as I clasped my paws over my face. I've got to go with them.